Hey everyone, thank you guys for joining us in today's episode on the Teens for Business podcast. I'm your host, Jack.
I'm Ivan.
I'm Jackie.
I'm Kylan.
Today we'll be talking about the recent East Palestine railroad disaster and its impacts on the railroad industry and specifically Norfolk Southern, the railroad company responsible for the derailment. So just to debrief you guys of a little bit of the details around the incident. So the East Palestine disaster was a freight train derailment which spilled hazardous flammable gases into the air. As a result, residents of the town and nearby cities were forced to evacuate to help them stay safe from the hazardous material. And although the residents have been allowed to return to the town, there are still a lot of questions about the air quality and the environment around East Palestine. And residents have also filed a big lawsuit against Norfolk Southern, which is seeking medical testing, proper cleanup regulations, and expenses for injured businesses around the town. So now, what do you guys think that the current recovery process has been really feasible for the town? Has the Norfolk Southern involvement in the cleanup, has it been effective?
From what I have read, since the train was carrying vinyl chloride, which is used for plastics, which is you know, everyone uses it. Um, you can't really prevent the transfer of dangerous substances simply because of how useful it is. But since it's so toxic, when it spilled, they didn't want it to explode. Um, so they burned it off, which kind of released these toxic chemicals into the air. Um, and then which impacted definitely respiratory wise, impacted many of the people living near the derailment. And the question is why is burning away the vinyl chloride a better alternative to um maybe just literally taking it away? um but from what I've seen, the people living near East Palestine, that place is probably going to be a wasteland for at least another week or two because of toxic chemicals. And definitely we should question how how properly and orderly the cleanup is happening.
Yeah, I think that's a
Yeah.
good, especially
Good.
especially about like the proper cleanup because I think the EPA, like the Environmental Protection Agency, they stopped, well, they told the company to stop the shipments of the hazardous waste out of the area because where it was going, people from that place of where it was supposed to go were no, we don't want this here. So I think there's a bunch of stuff around where do you put this hazardous waste? You can't just snap your fingers and it disappears. So I think there's also a lot about that the government and that the companies have to figure out in order to make sure people are safe and a greater amount of people aren't affected by what happened.
Yeah. So from what I've read as well, I think the chemicals that were being transported on this train were, yeah, like Ivan said, the vinyl chloride. And these chemicals are used to make PVC, which is a type of plastic. And so basically these residents that are in East Palestine, they've basically been exposed to these chemicals, and they've basically reported rashes, headaches, and a bunch of other symptoms. And even thousands of fish in these nearby streams have died just from these use of plastic. So I think it comes into consideration um the country as a whole's reliance on fossil fuels and plastic.
Yeah, for sure. I can definitely see the argument that the current recovery process is not really too feasible for the town. In fact, I'm pretty sure the only thing that Norfolk Southern has really stated about the derailment was a simple a letter from its CEO, I think, saying that it's just in solidarity with the town and the residents of the town. But definitely I think that is a little bit insufficient to like assist with what really happened. And definitely I could see what is going on with East Palestine. There's definitely some um the environmental regulations about the recovery have been definitely questioned. There's still a lot of questions about the air quality
Yeah,
and about the environment around it. So
I just want
Uh,
to add, like,
yeah.
since the company definitely knows that they're shipping vinyl chloride, even if the train wasn't all shipping vinyl chloride, I heard it was like 2 containers or whatever. It was like not like the entire train, but since vinyl chloride is a toxic chemical, is widely known as a toxic chemical, um, the the company should have some responsibility in taking action against stuff like this, making sure the tanks that carry the vinyl chloride aren't that easily punctured or reacts with the vinyl chloride and it causes explosion. Like they should probably look in the future and kind of prevent these disasters from happening beforehand. I think that's the role of the company. They should have done.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, actually. Especially like for other companies in the same industry or like even applicable elsewhere. Like, obviously, what happened was bad, but I think it's also a good lesson for the companies to reflect on and be like, oh, we should probably like make our standards stricter or like have more regulations in place and things like that, just to make sure like nothing like this happens on accident again. Because I feel like obviously it was an accident, but some part of it was somewhat preventable with like the proper checks and things like that. So I think other companies can like look at that and be like, oh, we can learn from this and like just make sure to not have the same mistake again.
Yeah, no, yeah, I definitely feel like yeah, regulations need to be a little bit stronger. I feel like there's a good question of why this didn't happen earlier because in 2013 there was a large derailment in Lac Megantic in Quebec, which is a similar disaster to the one that happened in East Palestine. Like it was definitely deadlier. I'm pretty sure it killed like 47 people, and the issue of the derailment was attributed to a human error. And in that accident, benzene was spilled, and therefore causing the air quality to be like damaged. The cleanup was projected to take 5 years. A lot of buildings were burned to ground, and were like several businesses were like had to be like relocated. So I feel like I was wondering, I understand that like technology in like tank cars have like improved them to be like stronger in terms of like durability and like carrying like those like chemicals. But I'm wondering like, I feel like it's an interesting question that why weren't like regulations like why weren't regulations like placed then? Like why specifically are regulations going to be like asked like now after such a big derailment in East Palestine, and why didn't we have those regulations like earlier? What do you guys think of that?
Um, it's from a business perspective, it's definitely not financially smart to have like safety because like suddenly because of safety I'm spending so much more money than I earn, right? Like and when I have to worry about worker safety, I have to spend money on, high vis vests, helmets, safety gear, while before, a worker would die and I'm like, okay, just need to hire another worker. From a financial standpoint, like that's basically what happened in like the 19th century, right? You're like, oh, someone died, great, let's find another worker. That's like how business worked back in the day, and obviously that's not smart. It's like once the workers start demanding changes, start demanding for these safety laws, that's when companies were kind of to uh, forced to kind of focus on safety rather than their massive profits. Um, and that's like kind of what the government has to do, kind of what the people have to. Like this is also seen in other places. Like motor racing is a very dangerous sport. People still die to this day, even with very high safety regulations. But all of these safety regulations only came after people died really gruesomely. Um, and it's simply because safety costs money, and once you impact safety, and like it's not related to the company, it's related to the people working for the company, so the company doesn't have a good financial reason to care for safety. So that's why we need to take more action, making these companies know like what is important and what is more important than their profits.
Yeah, definitely. I've heard like recent accusations against Norfolk Southern that have like said that they've prioritized the profits and I guess in some way the speediness of delivery uh in in front of like the safety of residents. So yeah, that's definitely a big concern where and we definitely need I feel like we definitely do need more regulations regarding that. And since Ivan like really like touched on like the business part of it, like the safety isn't really too much like acknowledged in like the business part of it. Safety is like a little bit like disregarded in the business part of it. Uh, what do you guys think this incident will like? What do you think the impact of this incident will be for uh just like Norfolk Southern, but also like the rail industry in general?
I mean, I think like, I mean, I don't want to get too much into politics, but I think for the railroad industry as a whole, it's kind of like because it was such a big incident in the eyes of the media and like it brought a lot of attention to it, so they're probably going to be under a lot more scrutiny. And like to Ivan's point about like how companies don't care if like their workers are dying, like that's true, and like it doesn't really, from their side, it doesn't make too much sense for them to be like, okay, we're going to put workers above profits. Like that's unfortunate, but that's kind of the way it works. And like I think there's also the point of like government regulations and like how that happens on the other side. But at the same time, because like these companies are really big, they're not just like some small like two-person company, these are like massive corporations. Like they have a lot of like power to like lobby Congress and things like that. So I think like even though this was such a big incident and like it calls for a lot more regulations, a lot more change, it's probably, I don't want to be too like pessimistic here, but it's probably not going to change a lot in my opinion.
Yeah, I just want to add like railroads kind of a dying way of transport. Uh, because it started, you know, what 18th century, late 18th century, early 19th century. That's when railroads kind of took off. But after cars and planes, it kind of lost its value because there's a lot of other options that are cheaper and quicker than using the railroad, because railroads have a lot of things that can go wrong. From what I've heard, now it's definitely getting better, but it's still not that worth it using railroads as compared to other methods of transport infrastructure. And that's why I think railroad workers, railroads in general as infrastructure is it kind of getting overlooked by the Department of Transportation, the governments, and even the companies themselves, because they're trying to find other ways to earn money, as not a lot of people are dependent on the railroad industry as compared to like 20 years ago, 30 years ago.
Yeah, I agree with that. And like I think Norfolk Southern, like as a whole, like they should have like some more consequences because the CEO, I think, like he declined to answer any questions about like the investigation. And I know he said that they plan to like rip up the tracks where the train derailed, but they should be more responsible in the fact that like they didn't check. I think it was like something dislodged on the track for it to derail, but they didn't conduct any like safety checks or anything like that. So the fact that they impact like so many people in the town and that they're not choosing to prioritize safety over money. Yeah, like Ivan says, like a big part of like the entire industry right now, that because of the fact that railroads aren't exactly like people's go-to choice for transportation, they're trying to make money, so they have to prioritize profit. So they're basically choosing money over safety, and there needs to be consequences for that.
Yeah, definitely. So I also want to feel like adding to Ivan's point, like since like the railroads have like kind of like died out, their popularity has like declined due to like cars, trucks as like a more popular way of like transporting like goods. I feel like also like the regulations on like railroad transport have been like also like kind of ignored because like most of it's like to like cars and trucks and other like road transportation. But like definitely for like because since like car accidents and like road accidents they happen a lot and train accidents are I'd say the major train accidents are pretty rare. But definitely we can see like the regulations have been a little bit ignored. But also want to add it to Kyvan's point that um Norfolk Southern will definitely need to take way more responsibility. In fact, the EPA is planning to charge Norfolk Southern $70,000 a day regarding the cleanup, and this like cleanup uh doesn't just include anything environmental. It includes the lawsuit, includes like the village recovery, includes like the construction to like rebuild the city, and definitely it's gonna have like a huge impact on like just the company. So also, what do you guys think of what would happen to like maybe like I guess stock prices of like Norfolk Southern? What do you guys think like the credibility of like railroads would go down after this incident?
I mean, I think like didn't their stock go down a lot?
I'm pretty sure they dropped like I don't know 10-20%. I don't remember, but they did. I think they dropped a lot.
Yeah. So I mean, like there's that obviously, but I think I also would like to point out that apparently rail shipping is very like cost effective and it's actually cheaper like if you're doing bulk shipping or like bulk transporting it's cheaper than like trucks and obviously cheaper than airplanes, but I think like because of like that cost effectiveness and like because you can get so much stuff in because you have like trains, right, like versus a truck, you're going to be spending a lot more money because you have such little space in comparison to like a whole train if you're doing a truck. But like I think because it's so cost effective, I don't think there's going to be like any significant like, oh, we're going to decrease the credibility of the rail industry because I mean Ivan's point about like businesses, they're still going to look at what is most cost effective, efficient for them. So even if this was a huge incident that like really blew up in the media, like I think they're still going to use rail. They're not just going to completely ignore it. They're not really going to decrease their usage of it. Because it's so like cost effective. I don't think it really makes sense from a business
Yeah,
perspective.
actually, I definitely agree because there they only when companies start caring about worker safety kind of things other people care about, it's when the government steps in and be like, hey, I'm gonna fine you or I'm gonna take away some stuff, and they're like, oh crap, that's not financially good, right? So that's when they actually take action. So financials actually is such a big thing that even they can disregard important things like other people's lives. And you can see all these changes happening now, like um where like real railroad workers are going on strikes more frequently, I believe. And a lot of people are against that because railroad workers actually earn a lot of money, but apparently their jobs are really hard. But like it's also seen in Europe, not only in America. Like in Europe, France, a lot of trained workers went on protest for obvious reasons. France goes on protest for a lot of reasons, but it's kind of related because if these workers are going on strike, the railroads aren't getting maintained, and like Jackie said, it's so cost effective. People still continue using railroad, and when railroads are not being maintained, stuff like East Palestine happens. I saw a video actually on Reddit about a train just going on tracks. There's nothing else, and the track was so not maintained. I think the train was going like 5 miles an hour because
Oh, no.
it was so easy to
Oh,
tip over. Like you can see the train just dipping up and down, wobbling. It was so slow, moving so slow because the track was so not maintained. And that's just what happens basically when workers go on strike and they're not being paid enough, their safety is being disregarded, and I don't think that's good for anyone really.
I mean, I think another thing is I'm like reading some stuff about like the way the rail industry works, and apparently like railroads are actually more environmentally friendly, or excluding like the accidents like in Ohio, but in terms of like fuel efficiency, they're actually 4 times as effective or like efficient with fuels than trucks, which I think is really interesting. So I think, I don't know, I feel like it's kind of hard for these big industries to have significant changes after just like this event. So maybe that's a really pessimistic view, but
Yeah, definitely. I think that we will. I still think that the rail industry will maintain its like popularity among companies as a cost-effective model, and that we definitely will need like for like on a business perspective, we definitely want to avert like any situations where workers go on strike, because I still feel like despite these incidents that the rail industry is like pretty profitable. I mean all the all the instances of like accidents and stuff, though those are gonna happen, right? That's not gonna like disrupt like a whole like established system of transportation. Although it has like died down a little bit over over like history with like cars and trucks like increasing in popularity, the rail industry is like still like very like popular for like as a means of transport. So I don't I don't think the credibility of rail industry will be compromised. So now we're gonna transition into the takeaways. What do you guys have? What do you guys think that? What do you guys like want to like take away from like our talk about the East Palestine disaster?
Yeah, so just like going back to like the strikes and stuff, like from the video, you can see like the damaged car on the train was like it was apparently allowed to leave its initial terminal just because like the car inspectors didn't inspect it properly, just with the amount of people going on strike and being laid off and not receiving the pay that they feel they deserve. So they're not doing their job properly enough. And that's like causing, that's what's happening. That's like causing like dangerous situations to occur. It's because people aren't managing the rails. The workers aren't happy with it. So they're not going to be focused on safety. And that's how ultimately like these disasters happen. I just thought that was a big takeaway.
Yeah, definitely agree with Kaiwen's takeaways that companies don't care about a lot of the important things we regular people care about, like safety, worker safety. We want to work in a good environment, we want to get paid, we want to not die in work. And companies don't really care about that unless something happens and they're like, oh crap, we're going to get fined or someone's going to jail. And that until there's a penalty for the company, they don't really care about these kind of stuff. And I think it's time to either the government or us regular people to uh, make this aware, make companies be aware of the things that are actually important to us. And I think that's actually happening today. So that's a good thing.
yeah, I mean, I think also like aside from worker safety, it's also like just collective society safety. Like with the situation in Ohio, it's obviously worker safety, but also like everyone who lives there who is affected by it, by the situation. And so um I think, but I do think like because business is so focused on, okay, this thing is going to make us profit, or like, oh, we shouldn't do that. That's way too expensive. We don't want to do that. But I think like because of the money focus, I feel like unless the government steps in and is like, hey, you guys can't do that, we're going to impose regulations on it, I don't think there's going to be like any significant changes. Because like historically with these events, they kind of like they happen, it's like a huge media day, and then they kind of just like quietly blow over. So I think it might just be like that. And I don't really, I mean, I hope significant changes will happen for like the environment, for worker safety, for just collective society safety, but I don't think a lot is going to happen.
Yeah, I definitely agree with those points. My main takeaway is that like the rail industry is like I feel like it's like profit, like opportunities have like sort of like decreased a lot, which causes the railroads to prioritize profits over safety. And definitely, another thing is that we definitely need to see more regulations with like, we definitely need to see more regulations in terms of like rail, rail cleanup with like rail safety and just like industry safety with the railroads. And then, yeah, so thank you all for tuning in today as we talk about the recent East Palestine disaster and its business impacts. We'll see you on the next episode of Teens of Business. Bye.